You know, a couple hundred miles away from here, the NCBA hosted their own convention called, and I'm not making this up, folks, CattleCon. Now, I didn't say that wrong. CattleCon. Kind of ironic, I think, don't you? Well, I didn't receive an invite to that one, and shockingly, if I had, I would have asked them if the brilliant marketing folks who came up with CattleCon, well, whether or not they were the same geniuses who also came up with the idea to eliminate the product of the USA label. I'm sure you all know this, but for those of you who don't, the NCBA has submitted a petition to the USDA asking them to eliminate the product of the USA label and replace it with an even more generic processed in the USA sticker. Now, I've been arguing for years that product of the USA ought to actually mean something. And at the same time, since right now, all you have to do is if you want to bring beef into the United States, all you have to do to qualify for that voluntary sticker, product of the USA, is repackage it. Well, I think that's false advertising. And I think most of the folks in this room do too. Why in the world would our own Department of Agriculture, for the last almost 20 years now, allow folks from out of the United States to bring livestock into the United States, boxed, and then repackage it and call it a product of the USA? Now, if I was a consumer, I'd be damn mad. Think about that a little bit. You trust that when we put labels on things, if it says made in the USA, it means it's actually made in the USA. See, what I think, seeing as how our Department of Ag put that on there, we started challenging them here a couple years ago. We put legislation in, and the legislation basically says if you want to put a voluntary product on it that says product of the USA, it ought to be born in America, it ought to be fed here, it ought to be raised here, and it ought to be processed here. Well, apparently we got some people to kind of think about that a little bit, and they kind of looked at the legislation and said, gee, maybe that is false advertising, and maybe if we do have a voluntary label out there that says product of the USA, maybe we might want to take some comments on what it ought to be. So what's the NCBA come up with? We think you ought to change that to processed in the USA. Now think about that. Make that processed real small and made in the USA real big. And then go back out to the consumer and say, oh, we're not false advertising, you got to read the small print. Well, I think it's time, and well, we didn't think the Department of Ag should be doing that anyway. So a few weeks ago, we found out that there were basically 0 comments on the NCBA petition. We sent a letter in, and we basically told them that we thought this was a bogus deal and that they ought to not accept it. Since that time, after we put it out, and I want to say this is what happens when you get grassroots support. Within a very short period of time after that, we basically called it BS, I guess, but we said that their proposal wasn't any good. And we just asked if some folks would get behind us on this thing, and within literally a few days, and by the way, the comment period closed on Tuesday, we had 256 comments, most of which were just as kind to the NCBA as I was. See, that's the power of grassroots support, and that's the power of the cattle industry. Now, Senator Tina Smith, she's a Democrat from Minnesota. I'm a Republican from South Dakota. We get together and we saw the power of this need to join and to get more grassroots activity earlier. Now, I presume you've probably heard of the letter that we put together earlier, and I'm not sure if you did or not, but let me share with you a little bit about it. We basically asked the Attorney General last year to begin with to do a review as to whether or not the antitrust laws that were in place were being followed by the packers. Well, let me just back up just a little bit. In 1921, when the Packers and Stockyards Act was signed into law, 5 major packers, they controlled 55% of the beef market. Today, exactly 100 years later, 4 major packers control over 80% of the entire market. Ladies and gentlemen, we're moving in the wrong direction. It's become clear that either the antitrust violations are occurring or Congress needs to fix the laws that we currently have on the books. At the start of the pandemic, I led a letter that was addressed to then Attorney General William Barr, and I requested the DOJ open an investigation into the potential antitrust violations. I was able to get just 3 of my colleagues to sign on to that letter. Then the pandemic hit. Prices started to rise. Beef was limited to the consumer. A few months later, we sent another letter, very similar in nature. This time we were able to get 18 of our colleagues on board. The attention was getting there. Consumers were making phone calls. Now we've heard anecdotally from folks that they are receiving requests to cooperate with that investigation. But as we've entered the beginning of this year with a new administration, it was important to make certain that this investigation was carried on and into the new administration. That's why earlier this year, Senator Tina Smith and I put out an open letter to the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, requesting the Department of Justice continue the investigation of the meatpacking industry to determine if antitrust violations are occurring. This is where you've come in. We put that letter out there and asked folks to call their members of Congress and tell them to sign on to the letter. Well, the results were great. 28 members of Congress, Republican, Democrats, House, and Senate from all over the country have signed on to that particular letter. To date, this is the largest coalition of members of Congress on a letter addressing the crisis in the beef industry. That's the power of grassroots support. But ladies and gentlemen, we got a long way to go. If we want to get anything done in this industry, we need to broaden the base and widen the tent. Like it or not, the House and the Senate Ag committees and the Farm Bill are not primarily focused on our farmers and our ranchers. Over 75% of the spending from the Farm Bill is focused on consumers. Furthermore, the majority of the members of the Senate and the House Ag committees, including the chairs, 75%, including the chairs, don't come from what we'd consider farm states, or as I would suggest, where cows outnumber people. There's only 9 states in the nation where cows outnumber people. Instead, they come from states where consumers vastly outnumber producers. If each of their senators in each of our 9 cow-producing states, even if all those senators supported our proposals, that would be a grand total of 18 out of 100. You're not going to get much done when you got to have 60 votes just to start debate. If we want to accomplish anything in Washington, we need to shift our focus. Instead of yelling in circles at each other, we need to prioritize having a uniform message going out of our combined circle, a message that will bring consumers into the discussion. Because at the end of the day, all ag policies, especially Farm Bill, should be driven by consumer demand and market access for the high-quality products that you produce. That's why our message needs to continually be focused on consumers and the negative impact of increased market consolidation. I want to close by just talking about a man who's sculpted, well, he's sculpted on a mountain not far from here. Name is Teddy Roosevelt, one of the 4 on Mount Rushmore. In the post-Civil War cattle boom of the 1880s, a guy by the name of Howard Eaton started the Custer Trail Ranch in the Dakota Badlands. He was soon joined by his brothers Alden and Willis and a friend from Pennsylvania. Thrilled with their new lifestyle and potential success, the Eatons wrote enthusiastic letters to friends back east. One such letter, published in a New York newspaper, caught the attention of Teddy Roosevelt. Roosevelt quickly made his way out to the Badlands and spent his time hunting and fishing and writing. He bought a ranch near the Custer Trail Ranch and struck up a friendship with the Eatons. Stories of ranch life and exceptional hunting spread like wildfire, and soon the Eatons found themselves being asked to host Eastern visitors. Now, they're like a lot of folks out west. It was just kind of a pleasure to have folks come and visit, and they welcomed them with open arms. But it wasn't long before their generosity and hospitality became incredibly expensive. Many visitors recognized the financial burden they were creating and offered to pay for room and board. While the concept flew directly in the face of Western hospitality, the Eatons had to consider that as a possibility. The first recorded paying guest was Bert Rumsey of Buffalo, New York. With the purchase of a guest book, the ranch officially began accepting dudes. The word dude today was different meaning than what it had back then, but back in Teddy's time, dudes were city slickers who, well, they didn't know the difference between a horse and a pole cow. Soon the concept of dude ranches would explode and become a phenomena that Howard Eaton could never have dreamed of. I'm here to tell you that today because there are 300 million dudes out there, and that we need to bring them to the ranch, or the ranch to them. They need to know your story. They need to know what you do in order to create a good product. They need to understand your way of life. They need to share an understanding of how important that is. They need to recognize that it means if they want to continue to have quality food products, that you play a major part in that. We are truly in great need of a Teddy Roosevelt today. The man who promoted the Dude Ranch, a real conservationist who loved the Western way of life in the Dakotas, but he wasn't against corporations. He was against the evil and the greed that sometimes comes with big business. He was a fierce defender of the American people. Teddy would not be impressed by what the Packers have become or by the fact that it has been tolerated. We need to rise up from this and find our Teddy Roosevelt moment, no matter the cost or how long it takes. Foreign Packers in particular have no vested interest in our lives. They don't care about our livelihood. It's time the Packers feel the 100-year-old wrath of Teddy Roosevelt's initial intent. I'll close with these 9 words. Some of you know I've come full circle on this, but hear this very loud and very clear. The time has come for mandatory country of origin labeling. Thank you.